All right, welcome to the Piece of Us podcast. I hope everyone's having a great day today. My name is Max.
And I'm Crystal.
And I'm Bonnie.
So we actually... Oh, go ahead.
I'm here too. I'm Joe.
No, I was going to say something about Bonnie's name, and that's why I was trying to say something really quick. She didn't actually know her real name until she was in 7th grade. Was it 7th grade?
Yes, it was.
Wait, really?
So she always was called Bonnie her whole life. And we all refer to her as Aunt Bonnie. And she's our special guest today, by the way. But she found out her real name is...
Yvonne.
Yvonne.
With an E.
Yeah. So tell us that story really quick, because I found that really interesting.
Is that where Bonnie comes from? Is Yvonne? I've always wondered.
Well,
if
I
it was
think
short for
growing up, I was always called Vonnie with a V instead of Bonnie with a B. And so I guess I just got the nickname Bonnie. And my mom always used to call me Bon, too, and my sisters. And then when I started 7th grade, Mom was like, "Do you want to go by your real name?" And I'm like, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, your real name's Yvonne." And I'm like, "Really? I have a different name?"
Imagine not knowing your real name until someone's like, "Do you want to go by it?"
So I started going by Yvonne, which was really difficult at first, but then I got used to it and didn't hear Bonnie too often. And I think probably the last 7, 8 months, now I'm used to Bonnie again.
Oh, yeah, because we've all been calling you
Yeah, I can actually tell when someone calls me who they are by what they call me.
that. That's really
It
interesting.
makes sense.
I know.
Up until about 6th grade, I went by Joseph, and then my teacher in it was 5th or 6th grade was like, "All right, do you go by Joseph, Joe, Joey?" And I never thought about going by any of those others.
I know.
And then I was like, Joe's the shortest one to write, so let's just do that. And if somebody sees me on the street and calls me Joseph, it's not what I go by, so I don't even think about it, except for a couple of really old family members that I still have that I rarely ever see because that's all they knew me as a little kid.
I actually have a little necklace with a little locklet in it that opens up, and on the back it says, Vonnie loved Grandpa. The grandpa I never knew, you know.
Aww.
Joanne has one too. We never realized growing up that Stephanie didn't have one.
Oh, that's so sad.
I know.
So come to find out, their sister Stephanie was a half sister, and they didn't find out till later in life. So there was a lot of little clues. I feel like that where you guys figured all of that out. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So we have some really great topics today, and it's actually going to be kind of trickled into next week's episode too, because we have a special guest coming next week that I'm really excited about. But we were going to talk about addictions. And that is our guest that we're going to be having on next week is he's gone through some alcohol addictions and some things that he's overcome. And I'm really excited to talk to him and have him. It's actually our Aunt Bonnie's husband.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited that he wants to come on here and share his journey and his story. So let's start back though at what is it like being married to or being close with somebody with an addiction?
I guess at first you don't look at it like that. I think you just are used, because we were both like 18 I was 18, he was 19. We were both 19 when we got married. And I think I don't think it started out like that, but I think it became like that over time, because we were both loved to go out and dance and have fun, and I think at a point that it just overtook him, and it was as time went on, it got harder and harder, and I started noticing, that it became a problem. But talking to him, I don't think he's seen it like that.
Yeah.
I think he just seen it as he was having fun.
Yeah.
But
I think that's how a lot of addictions start off, is just kind of you're having fun or you're doing this or that kind of thing. And then it can take a bad turn
right.
pretty quickly. And depending on, your passed. And I mean, I heard that, and I don't know if this is true, but is it true that there's a gene for addictions? Like there's a certain gene that people have more addictive personalities?
There is. This lady I used to work for, she lost her only daughter. She had a car accident, and they gave her pain pills, and she suddenly just couldn't stop taking them, kept going doctor to doctor to get different, more and more. And her mom fought for like 3 years to pass a Tammy's Law, to where all these were interlinked. So you can't just go to a different doctor, a different pharmacy. Now they have, for controlled substance, they have where they're all linked together, where you can't do that anymore.
That's good. That's
So
really good.
I do know that there is a gene out there. I'm not for sure. I don't know if it's simple as a blood test. I'm not for sure. I would love to actually, if it would be, if it was just a blood test, I think it would be interesting for him to take it to see, I don't know what the gene is called, or
Yeah, I don't know either.
I don't know. That's
even...
a little beyond, but I know that he had a lot of family members that also struggled with it. His mom was, later in life, she became an alcoholic, but she did get sober there at the end.
And I think that's a part of it too. And I don't think there's addictions as far as just like drugs and alcohol. I think that there's so many other addictions out
Yes.
there, video games. It can be really anything, even some people, abusive relationships or bad relationships. And it was really interesting actually, because when we started doing foster care and adoption, some of the stories and things that we would hear, from the bio parents or going on with the bio parents, but what trickles down to the kids and what they understand or know about it and kind of what, it can turn into. But we had one situation where we had our foster daughter, and she was with us for a couple months, and she came and sat Aaron and I down, and she was like, "We need to talk." And I'm like, "Okay." And she was like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be, she was supposed to be adopted, and she said, "I don't want to be adopted." And I couldn't understand why. And I was like, "What's going on? Like, why? Did something happen?" Like, and she then continued to say, "No, you guys are too nice." And she's like, "I'm used to a home where you scream and yell at each other. I'm used to a home where there is tension there, and that's what feels home to me." And I was shocked, and I was like, "What are we supposed to do? Call the caseworker up and be like, we're too nice to her? Like, she would like to,
Can you find somebody who's going to be mean to her, please?
go back to a group." Like, I was super confused. And then as we dove deeper into it, the way that it was described as if, you were to go to another country and you were to sit, live with another family with different culture and different traditions and different things. And you are sitting in different place for when you eat or whatever. And you just feel like it's not home. You just feel very out of place, and you feel very alone in that because you don't understand. And I was like, okay, that in that aspect, I understand it from that point of view. Also, she did have a couple of siblings here. And I'm okay to say it because they're okay with me telling this story, but it was actually Hannah and Alex's older sister. And her other thing was like, I've taken care of them my entire life. And I've made sure they were like as safe as I could, and I've done as much as I could, and now I know that they're safe and taken care of. And at this point, I need to go figure out who I am. And so I think there was a whole thing behind that, but it made me really look at it differently, that everybody's going through something different, and you can get used to something that maybe isn't the best for you.
Well, I think I can relate to that because I always grew up in a home where my parents drank. It was just, so I think at first that's why it really didn't stick out to me at all until it started affecting some of the other aspects of our life,
Yeah, because you just grew up around it. And
Right.
It was just...
So I literally grew up around it. Grew up in bars and, yeah.
Mom, you almost lost your relationship to addiction, you and Dad.
We did. So, Aaron had an addiction to video games, and I would say probably 90% of our fights were about video games. Like, it was the one part in our relationship that we struggled with. And I felt like I got tired of like constantly complaining or feeling like I was nagging or whatever about it. And so I just let it go eventually. And I didn't say a word. And I noticed him and I growing farther and farther apart. And one day, out of nowhere, and we hadn't fought, like we were good and things were good. And as far as he knew, everything was good. But that's not the way that I felt. And so one day he came into the room and he was like, "Hey, you know, what should be our goals this year? Like, what should we, have as our next goal?" And I said, "Well, my goal is that I want a divorce." And I remember his look on his face was like, "Wait, what?" I had no idea. And I said, "I'm tired of doing it all. I'm tired of, because he would work crazy hours and then he would turn to video games a lot. And so I was, with the kids, and I was doing everything I could to hold everybody together. And I just was tired and I felt like I couldn't do it any longer. And so it was a really hard part in our relationship going, through that. And he was like, before you like pull that trigger, before you do that, like, will you go to marriage counseling with me?" And I was like, "Okay, like I'll do that, but I'm letting you know I'm done, but I'll at least try marriage counseling." And so we went through marriage counseling, and marriage counseling was a really eye-opener for me because I realized when someone has an addiction or when someone is going through stuff, the worst thing you can do is shut down. And I internalized everything and I dealt with it on my own until I was done dealing with it. And that was the worst thing I could have done because at that point, the other person doesn't know and see the addiction as much as they should, and they don't realize that it's ruining a lot of things in their lives. And so the biggest thing is to communicate and is to open up to the other person and keep that communication open because otherwise that addiction can take over and ruin a lot of things.
I remember right when that happened, after you had kind of had some of that conversation, you had actually called me. I don't know if you remember that. And you're like, "Hey, here's kind of what was going on. Like, this is what I said." Like, you kind of sounded like, "Oh crap, did I go too far? Was this too much?" Because you were really worried because it was kind of, you had basically said, "Look, it's got to be either me or the game. I can't keep being number 3 in the relationship here." And I do remember after some of that happened, Aaron, I was talking to him, we'd spent a little time talking and he told me about it. And he basically was like, "All right, dude, what's more important to you, your amazing wife or your video game?" And he ended up going and he went in and grabbed a bunch of his video game stuff and is like, "All right, I can't have it here with me because I still am going to want to keep playing it." Like it was, he did kind of recognize it was an addiction. And so he's like, "I can't play if I don't have this." And so he, gave it to me. And it was one of those things though, where he didn't see he had an addiction really in it. It's nobody starts off doing anything thinking, "Ooh, I want to have an addiction to this."
Yeah.
But over time, sometimes maybe because of genes, because of just the addictive personalities, whatever it may be, things can become, even video games, even though it's not something that your body is physically addicted to, you eventually do get pretty much mentally addicted to it.
Right.
And, it was something that was like, "Hey, how is this even an addiction?" But it was kind of realizing, yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff that can happen. I mean,
Hey, even shopping.
Even shopping.
I have to say I've probably had a problem with that. Never to the point where I guess I just let everything go and I just bought. But
how many of the listeners out here thinking about
when I
their
look
Amazon
at over
purchases?
the years, I'm
Right?
sure I used to, that was one of my ways to escape what was going on in my life, to go and do something that gave me pleasure would be shopping. And that wasn't good. No, it was not
That hurts
good.
the pocketbooks.
Because then here comes the bills, right?
They say actually shopping releases an endorphin in your
It does.
mind. That's
Steve
the
says
same as an
he
addiction.
actually can see it in me when we go into certain stores. He's like, you ought to just see your eyes. They just light up and you're like on mission, you know?
Shopping stresses me out now.
You don't like shopping,
I
Max?
don't.
Why?
He
I
doesn't
don't know.
either.
It's just like stressful. It's just like
Why is it stressful?
I'd much rather shop online than in store because online I have a second to say, okay, I don't want this. But I feel like if you're standing and you already scanned something and you're like, maybe I don't want that. There's no like putting it back. But if it's sitting in your Amazon cart, you just click the delete.
Just click it.
Yeah.
It's funny because Alex the other day, it's actually a really funny story that he didn't share on his little thing, but we did sibling gift exchange. And he had saw these headphones that he knew that he had. Liam?
Yeah, I'm pretty
I think
sure.
he had Liam. And he saw that it was $25. And he was like, cool, like this is a steal, these are nice headphones. And he goes up to check out and it was $225. It was sitting in the wrong spot. And he's sitting in that moment and he's like, well, I'm coming in now. I already scanned it, and he ended up buying them. And you could tell he regretted that because he's like, there goes $200 on the sibling gift exchange. I mean, Liam was excited.
Liam lucked out.
Yeah.
The shopping can definitely become an addiction really quickly.
Yes. I feel like even online it's probably worse than going in the store.
It is. Probably. If I
Yeah.
had to guess, it probably is
And
worse
it's not the
shopping
same
online.
experience for me. I like to just go out, even if I don't buy a thing. I used to love just to go and go through the whole mall.
Just walk through every
Just
store.
go through the whole
It is
mall
fun.
in every store. Yeah. It's
You
just-
see all the husbands sitting outside the
Yes.
stores.
Yeah, well, that was actually the other day. We went to the little place to eat, and I told Steve, I said, I'm going to run into Kohl's next door. And right when we were walking out, it was Jamie and I. Here sits Steve and this older gentleman. Well, I guess he's older too. Sitting in the chair. And Steve says, oh my gosh, it's so fun. He said, we had such a great time together. We both had similar stories.
Oh, that's so funny.
It's a club.
It is a
Guys
club,
waiting for
right?
the ladies to finish their shopping.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think addictions can come in all different shapes and sizes, and whether it's video games, whether it's shopping,
Or
whether
eating, or anything.
it's fantasy football. I'm sure there's a
Yeah.
lot of people listening that are like, "Oh my gosh, my husband has serious fantasy football addictions." I've known people that are in 6 different leagues, and every year you're like, "This is too much. This is dumb. I have to watch every single football game." And all those kind of things. And then they're like, okay, I'm going to cut back next year. And then they're in an extra league the next year. And
So that one's kind of funny because all of our kids did a fantasy football team last year, and they were all into it. And it was Alex and his friend James who do watch every football game, and like they're into all the stats and all of that. And Hannah's like, I want to join, and they're like, you don't even watch any football. Hannah watches 0 football and doesn't really know what's going on around her. And so when they would draft every week, she would always miss the draft because she was busy with her friends and busy doing or out shopping, probably an addiction. She would miss these drafts, so it would auto draft for her, and she ended up winning
Oh my God.
off of the auto draft, and everyone was so angry that they're like, "You're not invited this year."
I would totally not let her in next year. Oh, that
won
would
by
be
accident.
so
Pretty
annoying.
cool, actually. I like it. I didn't know there was such a thing.
Right?
It's just auto draft for you.
It'll just auto draft for you, and it picked the right players. But yeah, it's just kind of funny, definitely. So, Max, do you have any addictions in your life?
Like you said, I don't know. I didn't realize if I did or not.
Yeah.
But-
I don't think you've ever truly been addicted to video games, but I do
I
think that you.
Definitely could spend too long sometimes on video games, or if there's nothing going on that day, sometimes I could spend a long time on video games. But I think I know when I need to stop or when I need to go do something, or
I think sometimes, and I think a lot of teens do this, but they spend a lot of time in their room or just on their phones or in video games or whatnot. And I think that you miss out on family time when you do that too much. So I think cell phones can become a really big addiction. It's really sad when you're like sitting together as a family eating dinner and you look around and everybody's has on their phone.
I know. I've done that. I've actually seen that several times going out
Yeah.
to dinner with like even you. I don't know. I don't know if you realize you have that problem, but I'll be sitting at the table like just looking around and everyone's on their phone, every single person.
Yeah, and you're like, what are we doing together as a society? I think there's so many of us that are looking down at our phone and looking at the next thing, and you get that instant gratification, but we're missing the world around us. And I think we all need
actually
to.
a good thing, because when Steve and I go out, we tend to not let each other be on the phone, and we sit and we scan the room. We're guilty of that, saying, there's another table not communicating. You know, it is such a common thing where you see like two people sitting at a table and he's on his phone, she's on her phone, or they're both on their phone, and it's crazy. I mean,
I do think this next generation coming up is going to have a harder time communicating because a lot of them do it through text message, and some of my own kids are like, I don't want to call and make an appointment. I have to talk to somebody. And I'm like, talking is good.
One of your, some of the kids had gotten into a little bit of trouble, so Aaron cut everybody's internet off right then. And it was like, all right, nobody gets internet right now. And so a lot of the kids were really freaked out because it was like a couple of the girls were chatting with some of the, their boys that they liked. And I think one of them was getting ready to have a date and couldn't finalize certain things.
Oh, yeah, I'm pretty
and
sure
she's
that-
like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to throw Witch Sister on blast on it. But she was freaking out like, oh my gosh, like it's going to be so embarrassing. Now he's going to just think I ghosted him and all these different things. And I remember looking at her and I was so confused because I'm like, your phone still works. You just can't use Snapchat right now.
Yeah.
Right.
And she's like, but that would be so weird to call and talk to him. I'm like, are you going to talk to him when you're on the date with him? Because they're so, I think so many people are addicted to their phones and all the different communications through there that we are losing certain communication skills in some ways.
and I don't think they see it because they didn't grow up like we did with no cell phones and no computers. And
I remember when cells were first becoming normal for the general population was going to be in the early 2000s.
yeah,
And I remember back in the day,
exactly.
dating, it used to be a deal breaker. If you're on a date with somebody and they pull their phone out more than once, maybe if their phone's going off and they're like, oh, sorry, and they turn it off or something. But if they pulled their phone out more than once, that was kind of a deal breaker on a date. Now it's like, if you can find somebody who doesn't do that,
That's a deal breaker.
put a ring on it. Like for me, it's put a ring on it. Like, oh my gosh, you've got somebody that actually is willing to spend time with you, not you and every other
I
person
think
in the
it's
world at
kind
the same
of ruined
time.
communication between people. You know,
Yeah.
Definitely
I
has.
still think that you have to. That's the number one thing in life is you have to learn to communicate.
So what's funny is I actually have this personal experience. Now, I've never gone on a date before, but I have talked to girls over the phone and stuff like that.
Wait, girls that weren't like your mom or Aunt Bonnie?
Yes.
Okay, just checking.
Um,
Sorry,
no,
sorry, dude.
no, and I knew everything about them before I even went on a date with them. And I looked at it later and I'm like, that's probably not the best thing. Now, I don't talk to any girls anymore, really. Not really talking to anyone right now, but
Did you like stalk their social media or like what did you do?
well, you just text them and you just like find stuff about them like slowly. I don't really stalk people's social media. I find that weird.
You do? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I don't.
No, but I don't know. Just when I'm talking to someone, I feel like I know everything about them before we even go to the first date.
Which is an interesting, because then what do you talk about when you
Exactly.
already know everything?
Yeah. I thought about that a couple times. I'm like, if I go on a date with this person and I already know everything about them,
You just re-ask them those questions.
yeah, just re-ask them the questions. Yeah, I don't
I
know.
don't know. I feel like the dating world is kind of different now. I mean, obviously, I'm not in the dating world, so I don't know. But from what I'm seeing in the teens and like other people around me, it's like even Melinda trying to date, like it's all done through text and through whatever. And I'm like, you have to have like in person, like conversations, or how are you going to be married ever? Like, how are you going to get to that level? Do you find it difficult, Joe, with like even trying to date?
Not that I make fun of Max a little bit for not dating, but I haven't really done a lot of dating lately. But it is kind of weird with the communication differences and, even people who maybe we grew up not having all that technology or not relying solely upon it. But now as time goes on, you kind of almost adapt to it, and it does make it a little bit more awkward. And I'm a little bit more old school. I would honestly much rather, unless if it's something quick, hey, I need this real quick, one question, you can get that one answer back from them. But I hate having conversations over text. Like,
I actually don't like texting either.
I can get all the information I need in 3 minutes worth of a conversation that is going to be a 2-hour text conversation. And honestly, you're halfway confused through the text conversation because maybe they got out of order or, just, I don't know. To me, it's one of those things kind of going to the addictions. I think if things are done like Max, I don't think your gaming negatively impacts your life. And I think that's with addictions in general is there can be something that you love. Some people like, oh my gosh, I love spending time with my dogs. Well, as long as spending time with your dogs isn't affecting your ability to work, your ability to sleep, your ability to interact with other people normally, I don't, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not an expert in it, but I don't think that's an addiction. But if it's all of a sudden you're getting to the point you can't carry a conversation with somebody because you're texting too much, or you can't spend time with your family because you're so addicted to TikTok that you have to constantly be on there, or, whatever it may be, or, drinking, you can't have a job properly. You can't, whatever it is, that's when it becomes really problematic.
I think that's one really easy way to find a addiction is to look at the sleeping habits with the addiction. Like, I find myself, like, there's a time at night where I'm like, I play up until this point and I stop at that point. No questions asked, doesn't matter what I'm doing, doesn't matter. I always stop at a certain time because I want to be up at this time tomorrow. I always try to wake up at 7. But I feel like that's a really easy way for me at least to find an addiction is like sleeping. Like if I'm staying up too late, then it's starting to become an addiction.
Right. I think, yeah, when it affects your normal life. So definitely evaluate yourself. And I think really inside you'll know whether you have that or not. And yeah.
Yeah.
Like recognizing it in yourself is very important.
That is a really hard thing, though, is sometimes the recognizing is I have a little bit of an addictive personality, and I've struggled with some different addictions over the years, both with some alcohol years ago and with painkillers. I actually got addicted to painkillers after I broke my neck. And the painkillers was an easy one for me to recognize because I was going through a lot of stuff with my neck at the time, and I would actually build tolerances to different painkillers to where, the first day you take it, you're like, wow, I feel really good, like no pain, maybe a little loopy, I like this. And then a week later, it wouldn't do anything for me. And so I was having to take harder and harder painkillers, and it hit a point where I would wake up in the morning and it's like, all right, I'm going to pop a couple of these painkillers and we're going to do a couple of these painkillers. And then let's throw some alcohol in because alcohol makes everything go stronger. And then I could get up and function. Like it was so bad, but I was working with a doctor where it was like, this is what I'm having to do to actually make the medication work to get what I need. And my body was physically addicted at that point where I was really glad that for me, it was not something that got so out of control that I was, having to do illegal things to get more, more painkillers, or I wasn't willing to try even harder things, to nowadays with fentanyl or something. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that did not exist back in the day. But it was like, for me, for that, I was able to recognize it ahead of time. But I had an issue with alcohol where I didn't recognize it as a problem until probably 3 years in. And it wasn't even after having some interventions at work. Like somebody went into my desk one time looking for something and found the mostly empty bottle of alcohol in there. And it was like, okay, hold on, this is a problem. They recognized it. They did an intervention. I was like, yeah, whatever, it's fine. It's not a problem. But it was years later when I actually went to go buy some alcohol at a store. I forgot my driver's license, and the store, they didn't just swipe your ID to make sure you're old enough. They actually would write the numbers down and then submit it to get run. And then they'd come back, and if it was fake, they'd post a picture of your ID so they know, hey, don't accept this ID again.
Oh my gosh.
And I went through one of the lines, and I was like, the girl's asking for my ID, and I was like, oh, dang it, I forgot. But I'm like, come on, I look old enough. Like, I come in here once in a while. Like, I know I've been through your line before. And a girl that was like 2 registers down hollered out my driver's license number.
Whoa.
And I was like, whoa. And, there weren't a bunch of customers around, at least. So it wasn't like I wasn't worried that she hollered the number out. But I was like, do you have a photographic memory? And she's like, no, you come in here and buy a bottle of alcohol every other day.
Whoa.
Whoa, that's a problem.
That was what it took for me to recognize it was a problem, not the interventions people tried. I did have people in my life trying to help me, but it was like to have a random person basically just recognize you are in here so often, and I write your number down so often that I have it memorized. Like, I don't need to see your ID because I know your ID is valid because I've run your number before and I've memorized it. And that for me was like, okay. And then that was when I recognized, all right, I got a problem. I got to stop. But it does sometimes take so long to even recognize it that for some people, it can be drastic. They could have already had a lot of really bad things happen in their life, yet you always find excuses as to why it's not a problem or
Right.
those. And so it's great to, if you ever look at your life and you take stock in your life and say, okay, like Max, like you're saying, all right, I love playing video games. Like, there's no doubt about that. But I have set strict rules for myself. And if I start realizing that I'm breaking those rules, I have to step away from it. And I think that's, for a lot of people, a really good thing to be able to just go take stock. And am I shopping too much? Look at your Amazon account history. How much Crystal, not going to lie, Crystal, there's been a few times you buy stuff and I'm like, at what time did you buy this? You're like,
3 a.m.
It
3
was
a.m.
about 3 a.m. I'm like, and that's a problem. You need to shut your Amazon off. Find a way to block the times.
I knew when I started getting weird things that I'm like, did I really need this little can opener thing that attaches to this, that does it a certain way? Like, I can just use my hands to open a can.
And it's not some video you're doing it for. You're just doing it because you want to try it.
Just like, I don't know, because you wake up at 3 a.m. and you start scrolling on your phone and then some weird ad comes up or some picture and you're like, what is that? Oh my gosh, I didn't know I needed that in my life. And
I know.
that is when it becomes a problem, when you start just getting these random things that I'm like, okay, no more 3 a.m. purchases. I haven't done that in a while. Like, I'm working on it.
I do want to come back to Dad's story because I do really want to say good job, Dad, for getting over your addiction. Do you still feel like to this day he still has like?
Okay, so
does he let it loose sometimes, or do you have to like put him back on track?
He does so good, and we're gonna have to talk about this on another one because he is really good at, kind of like you said, like, so it used to be a problem because one of my things that I didn't like about it is I felt like I was going to bed alone. Because a lot of times he would wait and then he would go play at night and then I was going to bed by myself. And so I was like, why am I married if I'm still going to bed alone? Like, you know what I mean? What's the point?
Yeah.
And I think that was one of my issues with it. But he does really good at like, okay, it's now like our time when the kids go to bed and then we spend time either watching a show together or just talking, or we have like those times. Sometimes I feel like he's like rushing it so that, because then it's like after I go to bed, then he plays. And some nights I can tell like, okay, he wants me to go to bed.
Crystal, if you would just get into gaming, then it could be a couple's
Okay,
activity.
that's a whole other topic on this whole thing because I did for a quick minute. League of Legends was the game I got. He was like, please play it with me. And you know what? I got so good at that game.
Didn't you guys stream it together at one point?
I don't know if we ever, he said that we should stream it, but I never streamed it. But I placed gold and I was doing so good. For those that play League of Legends know that that's really good. But then I noticed myself started to getting addicted to it. And then I started getting mad at him because he wasn't playing the game right. And then it became these like problems because he would run out and get himself. And anyways, it's just a whole thing. And I realized that it was toxic. In that moment when I got upset with him over a video game, I was like, I'm out, you know, and I don't play video games because it's just not in my personality. And I know it's not something I really want to spend my time on, but he's done really good at setting limits and then playing during those limits and all of that. Every once in a while, he gets a little crazy with it, but he is so good at recognizing it in himself and then pulling back where he needs to. So, yes, he has overcome it, and I'm very proud of him.
Good job.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like any of you guys have ever had like a random kind of almost a silly addiction to something?
Let's see. Have you had any silly addictions?
I did actually. When I used to work in Scottsdale, when we were doing billing, you know, some days we didn't have a lot to do, and I actually got into the lottery. You know, not the lottery, but the Las Vegas on your computer where you had all these different games, and they would give you like 150.
Oh, the free CDs.
The online the online like video gaming where you're doing the
online
fake
video gaming. So you would be excited because you could play for like, you know, depending on how good you did that day, you could play for a long time. But I was never willing to put money into it, so I always only played on what they were willing to give me. But sometimes it would be like 3 hours, and then I wasn't getting my work done. And so I finally realized that, no, that was just... And then I'd find myself even at home doing it. And I wasn't getting my stuff done at home. I was just being consumed by this game. So I finally had to stop it, you know?
Mine's probably cookie dough. I love cookie dough. Joe actually saw me
so
eating
bad.
it the other
That could be an
day.
addiction.
she started eating it, and I kind of the way she was looking at that cookie dough, I was like, "Ooh, can I have a little bite?" But it was kind of like, you know, going
I
up.
gave you a piece.
Yeah, she did. She was really
I don't know
good,
if
but it
that's
was
a good addiction.
I felt
don't-
like
so
walking
bad.
into
That's
something
horrible.
going, do I get between this girl and her food?
Right? I feel like whenever I get stressed or like I'm having a bad day, like I just need like cookie dough in my life or like something. And I know it's so not a healthy
Eating that raw
addiction.
cookie dough, I think you are taking a chance every time you eat any of that cookie dough of getting salmonella. You're rolling the
here's
dice.
the thing.
I've
Here's
eaten
the
so
thing.
much raw cookie dough, and it's never been a
One
problem.
day you're
Yeah.
gonna
That's
roll the
fake.
snakes.
It's fake.
I know. I don't know. I told
don't-
Aaron the other day, he said that to me, and I was like, you know, some of us are brave in our own ways. I'm brave enough to know that I'm not scared of cookie dough.
There's like a total of 3 diseases you could get from like eating raw cookie dough. The raw eggs can give you salmonella, and then the raw flour can give you I don't
I
know.
actually heard raw flour is worse than raw like eggs.
It is. Yeah, it
But-
gives you I forgot what it
Who
was called.
knows?
but
I don't know. Everyone.
Be careful.
Yeah, I know.
I eat
think
my
mine was
my steak
cleaning
rare.
house.
I eat raw cookie dough, and I eat at Filberto's. So you know what? I'm good.
I think one of my addictions actually was cleaning house. Being really...
I think that's a good addiction.
Would you like to feed your addiction and come over to my place?
No, it got to the point to where I couldn't handle anything out of place, and it, you know, like when I used to have carpet, I used to have the lines in it. It'd have to be like that every day.
That's like an OCD kind
That's
of
good
Yeah, it
OCD
was
right
house
there.
clean.
Yeah, and you know, my mom used to say there'll be a time in that won't really be important to you anymore, and you won't get anxiety over, you know, things like that. And yeah, it actually did happen. That now
That's how I am with my car.
I'm not so. Yeah, well, that's how I was with everything: my car, my house, and well, even Crystal can. People used to say they hated to come to my house because they felt like it was too clean and I was too obsessed with.
We would go up and visit her house, and every summer, my sister and I used to go and stay up there. And you would have your rules, and I didn't mind it, but I mean, I'm pretty easygoing. But you were like, when I come home from work, if the lines are in the carpet and everything's clean and done, then I'll take you to do something fun. And so we would spend our vacation cleaning and making sure those lines were in the carpet. I'm pretty good at those lines. in
So
the
that's why I
carpet,
don't have carpet
just
anymore.
saying.
Were you one of those that if you walked into your house at that point, you'd be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, it's such a mess," but then the person's, we're looking around going,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
"Where? I cannot find a single. Oh, I think I see a pen over there." Like,
One of my nieces used to come and she would open things and do this, and then she'd show, "You do have dust in your house. See, you have it." I'm like,
try to go find it, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Oh," but then you went back later on and we're like dusting that area out, right?
yes, yes. I wasn't raised like that. I don't know where I got that or why I was like that, but I'm not like that anymore. I think I've learned to,
That's how I am with
let
my
it go.
car. Like, I'll see someone do something, like, or even if we're going somewhere, like when we were going to California, going to the beach, I was like trying to think of like ways to keep my car clean.
Oh my gosh.
But luckily it turned out, and
Your
I only had
sisters
one-
tried to
yeah.
get on your nerves too. Like Hallie got in the car, we were leaving the beach, and she had her hand like this, and she gets into Max's car. For those of you who can't see me, she had her hand in a fist, and then she's like, "I'll do it, Max. I have beach sand, and I'll drop it in your car." And he's like, "Get out of my car! Get right with me."
I hate to say this, Max, but when you get your first house, I think you're gonna be like that too.
You're
Oh, that's
have
how I'm
the
gonna be,
same-
100%. I like everything to
Until
be
you have
neat.
kids, then they teach you.
I
You
do
can't be
I
like
do remember when you guys first had your little kids, how you were so neat freak, and
Oh.
everything had to be perfect, and
Everything
then
had to be clean and perfect.
and it was like hand sanitizer every 7 seconds,
Oh
and
yeah, I was really bad in the beginning.
it was so. And then I remember by the time Logan comes around, it was like meh.
I was like, his binky fell. You're fine.
It's okay.
You'll survive.
the
Don't have to
three
sanitize
the
it.
3 second rule definitely was in effect with by the time Logan was around.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being a part of all this with you. And we have a really exciting episode next week with my Uncle Steve. And yeah, we will see you guys next time. Peace.
Peace.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody.